Ah, it seems another adventurer strays themselves into the eternal forest. Worry not. I am Ronaldo Gandolfi. Welcome to my cabin. It's not very often adventurers stray into these woods. However, it seems you have been enticed by Walter's game. So for that, I am here to help you.
I'm sorry, when did you get here?
Take this for your journey. 'Tis the Whip of Alchemy. A whip imbued with magical properties that should allow you to slay the creatures of the night.
But I am a creature of the night, for crying out loud. I'm a freaking vampire!
Walter likes to play a cat and mouse game with those who enter his castle. So, you must be aware of that.
Oh my god, is he even listening to me? Am I in hell? No, I can't be in hell again.
Just remember, if you require anything, just come back to my cabin. And if you need quick transportation here, there's tickets that allow safe passage into my cabin. Good luck.
What? Oh my god, why is my hair blonde? Greetings, my Cherryful Chariots. It's been a while since we last spoken on anything Castlevania related. So now I'm here to break this hefty of a curse and make this review on one of my favorite Castlevania games ever made. But you must be wondering, Cereza, what is a Lament of Innocence? Well, I'll tell you. Castlevania Lament of Innocence is a game that came out on October 21st, 2003, meaning that it celebrated its 20th anniversary just recently. It was a game that came out primarily on the PlayStation 2, and it was notable for a lot of things.
Why is a vampire locked away here?
Shut up!
Sarah?
Leon, yes.
Who are you?
Welcome.
Sarah!
Yeah, Lament of Innocence's reputation is either non-existent or not very good to know, considering that this game primarily is the reason why people believe that the 3D Castlevania games aren't that good. And if you only looked at it for like a minute, yeah, you could understand why people would say that. But worry not. I, Cereza Valentine, am here to correct this. I am here today to explain as to why Lament of Innocence is probably my favorite Castlevania game of all time, if we're discarding Harmony of Dissonance from the straight up bias bin. Now, if you haven't been schedulely up to date when it comes to my reviews, allow me to catch you up to speed as to what we're going to be talking about today. Usually when I do reviews, I like to cover them based on a list of categories that I have set up. For example, in this review, we're going to be tackling Lament of Innocence in these following categories: story, characters, gameplay, enemies, bosses, tone and setting, and lastly, conclusion. Yep, you heard that right. For the first time in forever, this is the only Castlevania review where there's only 7 sections as opposed to the usual 8. Now, the first reason is because, although usually I do music sections in my reviews, I've kind of already expanded on that in my other video chronicling all the different Castlevania games as OSTs and what songs within those OSTs I think are really good. So if you want to look at my opinions on the OST for Lament of Innocence, you could check out that video that's longer than the Bible. Secondly, I wanted to address the music in this game as well as the areas and other things that the music is accompanied with. So yeah, that's practically why we don't have a music section this time around. But I guess you're just gonna have to work with me on that. Also, I'm gonna repeat a disclaimer because I feel like it's necessary for this. For anyone who's experienced the game different than I have, please do understand that anything that I say beyond this point is my personal experiences that have come with Lament of Innocence, and I know damn well that most people do not share my same experiences. If you want to leave your own opinions about the game, you can surely do so in the comments below, just leave them respectfully, and do remember that even though I'm a vampire, I still have a heart. With that being said, I can now formally begin the review of Castlevania Lament of Innocence. Before our story can formally begin, there is always a prologue. Similar to games like Harmony of Dissonance and Curse of Darkness, Lament of Innocence starts the game with a prologue, where, in essence, it basically sums up each of the characters that we will be introduced to throughout the entire game. Sort of, but you'll see what I mean in a minute. Regardless, it foretells of a story of how a band of knights was invincible due to the capabilities of two men. One of those men being our main protagonist, Leon Belmont. The other being a tactitious gentleman named Matthias Crunkfist. It states that the two of them had a friendship that came second to none. However, upon a victorious campaign in what I'm going to assume is Jerusalem, God bless the Holy Land, Matthias comes back to see that his wife Elisabetha is ill, and soon later she dies from her affliction. Rotting away from his grief and sorrow, Matthias becomes bedridden as a result. However, a year passes, and turns out Leon is doing just fine, without his friend Matthias, as he seems to be running the company extremely well. However, one fateful day, monsters randomly show up within Leon's convent and start attacking people. Leon wants to get authority from the church, but since the church is trying to take care of Muslims in the East, they can't really prioritize themselves with freaking fish people, zombies, and fucking whatever the hell this is. However, one night came, and Matthias, struggling to walk from his sickbed, decided to inform Leon as to where exactly the monsters are coming from. And, come to find out, it actually is coming from a vampire who lives within a castle within a forest that is cursed with eternal night. He also states that Leon's betrothed, Sarah Trantoul, has been kidnapped by said vampire. You know, Matthias, you really could have led with that one. Also, Leon, how the hell do you not notice your girlfriend is missing? With a tough choice to make, Leon renounces his lordship and chooses to go after his betrothed, ensuring that he enters the Eternal Forest with nothing but hope in mind. Upon seemingly running blindly through the woods, Leon encounters what I would like to call a dimensional disturbance.
What the hell is this?
Where he enters through an area that transports him into the true Eternal Forest, where he meets Ronaldo Gandolfi. Leon is now on guard as he believes that Ronaldo to be a monster. However, as the two exchange words, he no longer starts to believe in this suspicion. Regardless, it's through this dialogue that we learn exactly what kind of knight Leon was. Apparently, he was a baron. For those of you who aren't in the know, a baron is an aristocratic title that means that you're more powerful or you have more weight to your name than a lord. However, you're not as important as other titles like counts. Still though, a very high position to have. However, since Leon has abandoned this title, he doesn't want Ronaldo to start calling him baron or lord, as he views the two of them as equals. So, Ronaldo complies and allows Leon to follow him to his cottage. Upon arriving, Ronaldo tells Leon to stay in place. However, Leon has a question to ask him, and that question falls under the lines of, "Why the hell would you live in a place like this?" He explains that he has unfinished business with the Count of the Castle, that being Walter Bernhard, who is the vampire that was mentioned in the prologue, in case you were wondering. Ronaldo doesn't try to explain himself any further, as he doesn't believe that it's worth Leon's knowledge to understand, and Leon agrees and chooses not to pry any further. Leon then asks him a question I'm sure we would all think about, and he asks why Ronaldo is living so close to him if he is this dangerous. And Ronaldo explains that eternal life can be very boring, cause, you know, immortality is a bitch. So, in order to entertain himself, Walter lets Ronaldo live because he has the idea that Ronaldo helping the hunters who ever arrive at his castle makes the challenge more interesting, and he views it as a cat and mouse game, in which he never loses, due to one simple thing: eternal night. Ronaldo then explains that a large majority of the powers that vampires exhibit come from the night, and since the castle is coated in eternal night, you can imagine what this means for literally anyone else trying to fight against Walter. They will lose 100 to 1. It's like being a new player in a PvP game where your first opponent is someone who has all of the cheats activated. Yeah, you can understand how much of an uphill battle this is. With determination in his step, Leon is undeterred, as he envisions him being defeated by his own hands. And this is when Ronaldo starts to guess as to whether or not why he's here. And turns out, he guessed correctly! His guess was simply that Walter had taken somebody precious to him, which Leon agreed to was the case. Ronaldo then explains that that's usually how most of his cat and mouse games happen. He'll steal someone precious to you, and then you'll have to come and get them. Ronaldo takes notice that Leon came to the forest unarmed, which for him is either brave or very stupid. However, Leon says that he does have a weapon, however it was his sword that he had to give back to the company due to the fact that they owned it. And since he was no longer a baron, he happily obliged to give the sword back.
Honest to a fault.
Ronaldo compliments his honesty and chooses to give him the Whip of Alchemy, where if you take a good look at it, you can recognize what kind of whip this is. However, I will not say what it is because it's a spoiler, so we shall move on. Leon tells Ronaldo that he has no idea what alchemy is, and basically, Ronaldo gives a sum up of what alchemy is in the biblical sense, in which this particular science is used to explain God's world, or the creations of God, using stuff like modern day sciences and whatnot. As you can see, alchemy in the Castlevania universe takes a more mystical approach, as it mixes hardcore sciences with more mystical practices like spells and summonings and whatnot. Oh, another revelation I think I should mention is that Ronaldo actually knows who Matthias is, more so because he has known him longer than Leon ever has. Probably because both families studied alchemy, but that's besides the point. He then reveals to Leon that Matthias' family has an oral tradition of passing down alchemical spells and seals down from generation to generation. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that these oral traditions have suddenly become printed, probably because Matthias wrote them down in a book. Leon is puzzled by this revelation as he never really knew Matthias Kronkvist knew anything about alchemy, he just thought he was really smart. However, Ronaldo reveals the reasoning as to why this was such a secrecy because the world at large views alchemy as a heretical practice. So then he asks Leon whether or not he believes that alchemy is a heretical practice. Leon replies with no, because if he is a friend with Matthias, then he is a friend with him. Afterwards, Ronaldo grants Leon's gauntlet with a magical ability, which from a gameplay angle, just means that you can now parry. However, within the story it is said that certain monsters have certain energy, and when they attack, they release that energy. So, if Leon perfectly blocks these attacks, he can gain that energy for himself. And he can imbue this power with relics, which will allow him to use magical abilities. With all that being said and done, Ronaldo tells Leon that that is simply all he can do for him. However, before Leon gets to go though, Ronaldo imbues him one last piece of information that may be vital to what he's going to do next. He states that in order to progress into Walter's throne room, he has to get the soul orbs from 5 monsters that are guarding it. Which, if you played the game already, you know is a flat out lie, but you know what, whatever. Leon gets pissy in the same way that a teenager gets pissy when they're told to do the chores, and Ronaldo assures them that if he needs help, all he has to do is holler back to the cottage and he will have supplies of items, potions, and whatever have it for him to have. Granted, he needs to pay for them shits because, you know, the market economy isn't gonna run itself, but he will have them in stock. After that is all said and done, Leon heads to the castle's entrance and prays for Sarah's safety, as after that, he walks in and prepares for whatever monster he might face next. Now, depending on how you entered the game, you could probably enter various different areas depending on how you choose to enter the portal room. Me personally though, the first thing I did was go through the House of Sacred Remains, then the Garden Forgotten by Time, then the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory, then the Dark Palace of Waterfalls, and then ending it off with the Ghostly Theatre. As you can see, I went for a pattern. After traveling throughout the entirety of the House of Sacred Remains and defeating this, he moves on to the Garden Forgotten by Time, where after exploring that whole area for a bit, he encounters the Greek mythical monster, Medusa, who seems to actually have dialogue in this game. Surprising, I know. Not really an important thing to mention, however, all the statues within this boss fight's room are, or were in this case, actual people, and Leon found that out the easy way, as the face he put on was, well, it was just beautiful. Regardless of that though, Leon defeats Medusa, and Medusa seems to be shocked at his capabilities, as she believes that the whip's power has been heightened somehow, and asks whether or not the whip has completed its form. Leon looks at her confused, however before he can really get an answer, Medusa just tells him to eat shit because he's never gonna defeat his master, in which she then plays the longest game of English or Spanish I have ever seen. After defeating Medusa, Leon returns to Ronaldo's cabin with a strange look on his face. Ronaldo takes notice and he asks what's up. Leon then informs him what Medusa had said earlier about the whip's completed form. Ronaldo then admits that yes, the whip is not at its complete form, and he also admits that it's probably more powerful because the whip more so suits Leon than it ever did him. However, he also states that he shouldn't worry about completing the whip because it is impossible to do under any normal circumstances. Leon tries to pry further, but Ronaldo just rejects him and tells him that he has better things to do, in which Leon does so. After going through the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory and defeating the golem within that area, he soon finds himself within the Dark Palace of Waterfalls, where he encounters a certain entity within its walls. Leon is introduced to Yahim Armster, who quickly reveals to him that he is a vampire like Walter is. However, Leon is stumped by a certain question on his mind. If Yahim is a vampire, why is he imprisoned in here while Walter is up there?
Shut up!
Okay. He reveals to Leon that the reason why he's down here is because of Walter, and the fact that he has a stone called the Ebony Stone, which from how he phrases it, it most likely enhances Walter's vampiric abilities to some extent. And it is due to this very stone that Yahim is now down here. And if Leon wants to know more about this magical stone, well...
If you want to know... Beat me! It'll be a nice prelude to defeating Walter. I'll beat you. To a pulp!
Once Yahim is defeated in a proper bout, Leon then asks him again about the stone. Yahim then complies and tells him that the stone is made of alchemy, similar to all the alchemical things that Ronaldo has been doing. And it is the primary reason as to why there is eternal darkness within the castle. However, the math is not mathing. If eternal darkness is set by the Ebony Stone, wouldn't that mean it heightens Yahim's abilities as well? Well, Leon said that same exact thing, and Yahim replied that the Ebony Stone chooses its master, which then causes Yahim's power to be pale in comparison. It's like bringing a water gun to the Battle of Hastings. Yeah, you're gonna die. Regardless though, Yahim curses out Walter's name one last time before he disintegrates for good, seemingly never to be seen again. Leon then reflects on this knowledge and processes that probably Ronaldo knows something about all this, so he scurries on back to the cottage. Upon returning, Leon then asks Ronaldo about the Ebony and Crimson Stones, in which it's revealed that Ronaldo knew about the existence of the stones since the very beginning. However, he felt that telling Leon wouldn't benefit any party at all, considering that Eternal Night would still be present. However, since Leon now knows of the existence of said stones, Ronaldo complies and explains the whole backstory between the two. As he states, the main purpose of alchemy is to create a stone called the Philosopher's Stone, where the primary ability of said stone is to provide eternal youth to whoever wields it. It just so have happened that the Crimson Stone and the Ebony Stone were happy accidents in attempts to make the Philosopher's Stone. Leon knows the purposes of the Ebony Stone, however he's now curious about what the Crimson Stone is capable of doing. Ronaldo answers that according to rumor, that the Crimson Stone is able to turn other vampire souls into power that allows its user to expel that said power at will. Ronaldo states that these two artifacts are similar to how the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail are so important to Catholics, It's that important to vampire society. However, Leon gets the bright idea that if they could harness the power of the Crimson Stone for humanity. However, Ronaldo reveals that there is one problem with that. Whoever uses the Crimson Stone also turns its user into a vampire. So, no matter what, humanity is doomed. They then continue to talk about it for a minute, and upon realizing that Walter now has the Ebony Stone, their biggest fear now is whether or not the Crimson Stone has also awoken. However, a bigger fear is whether or not it's already within someone's possession. Regardless, the conversation ends there, and Leon returns back to Walter's castle to get the final orb. Leon soon finds himself in the ghostly theater, where eventually, after going through the nightmare realm that is the damn place, he soon finds a stage where, gasp,
Sarah?
Leon, you came to save me.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad you're not hurt.
I can't believe you're safe.
Let's get out of here first.
Yes.
Who are you?
Oh my. Too bad. And I thought this would work so well.
I was careless. It was obvious that it wouldn't be so easy.
God, this game needs a remake so bad. Yup, the figure that has made themselves known to Leon is none other than Succubus. And since I have integrity, and I love for you to all keep your ears intact, I'm going to skip this narrated portion. Anyway, Succubus gets defeated by Leon because she's an actual piece of shit, and we get this following bombshell.
Then, like that old man, you would have...
Old man, you're talking about Ronaldo. What do you mean?
That old man... his own daughter.
Succubus had something to do with Ronaldo's daughter, which we now learned he just had. So we return back to the cottage where Leon asks Ronaldo about his daughter. Especially when Ronaldo seems so happy to see him. God, Leon, you're a mood killer. Regardless, Ronaldo asks Leon to drop it because he doesn't want to talk about it. However, Leon, being himself, urges Ronaldo to share his story, as that's the least he can do for what Ronaldo has been doing with him for the entire game. That being helping, by the way. And for this next section, I think it's best if you hear it from Ronaldo himself, considering I don't think I can match the same level of tone that he is able to do. So, enjoy.
Very well. I'll tell you. It was 5 years ago. A cold night with a full moon. I returned home from picking herbs necessary for the secret arts. And what greeted me was a sea of steaming blood. And at the center of it were the bodies of my wife and son. I could not believe my eyes. My daughter was there, laughing, blood dripping from her mouth.
She was turned into a vampire?
That's right, by Walter. My daughter went out a window without even looking at me. When I recovered, I built the whip with alchemy. Then, I searched for her.
I see. I've heard enough. So this is what you meant when you said you owed him.
I challenged Walter, but nothing came of it. That's why I live here and help those who wish to fight him.
I never would have guessed.
Forget everything I just said. Think only of yourself now. He's not an opponent you can beat while distracted.
No, you're wrong.
What do you mean?
The force of your
After that heartwarming conversation, Leon returns back to the castle and uses all the soul orbs to get access into the Pagoda of the Misty Moon, where the most infamous cutscene from this game takes place. Probably because of my own doing, but you know, I like to have fun around it. Anyway, this is the first time within the game that we actually get a visual representation of Walter, because throughout the entire game, we've only known his name. We've never known his face. And now, it's perfect. Damn it, sorry, I'll stay focused. Regardless of that, however, Walter comes in, greets Leon, and even shows Leon that Sarah is right here next to him. Leon calls out to Sarah, however, Walter has different plans in mind, and tries to subdue him by getting him unconscious. Okay guys, not like that! He uses his vampiric powers to try and get Leon to sleep. However, that little stunt fails, and then we get to see the most acrobatic thing I've ever seen a Belmont do. Regardless, Walter smirks this off and asks Leon if that is Ronaldo's whip, because you know, people come by with whips all the time. However, while Leon is puzzled that his whip attack did not work a single bit on Walter, Walter then remembered a certain thing that someone certain had told him prior. Keep in mind, this one dialogue box is one of the most important dialogue pieces in the entire freaking game, because of one word. However, I will not say it, because that will be held for later on. Anyway, just remember to keep that one piece of dialogue within your brain. Regardless, Walter chooses to hand Sarah over to Leon, and tells him that he will be on the highest floor. And if he wants access to get into that, he would have to go through the entire thing. And even have to go through one of his secret bodyguards. We're gonna see him in a minute. However, he does that whole maniacal laughter thing and then leaves. After some time had seemingly passed, Sarah has been able to wake up from her reoccurring joke here. Leon sees that Sarah is now awake and is glad to see that she is still coming to. However, they can't stay there, so they plan to head to Ronaldo's cabin to stay the while. So the two leave the castle and start heading their way to Ronaldo's cabin. However, there is a small problem.
Sarah, this way!
Ronaldo then comes outside to see what the commotion is and sees Sarah lying on the ground. He then tells Leon to head back inside while he does everything he can to help fix whatever the hell she has. After some seemingly reported time of Leon pacing around the cabin like he's waiting in a hospital room, Ronaldo returns to him with some news, and this is one of those cutscenes that I think it's better if you watch it for yourself.
How is Sarah doing?
She's sleeping in the back.
What in the world happened?
The barrier around this house. It responded.
What are you saying? That's not possible.
There's no use hiding it. So I'll tell you plainly. That girl has been tainted by the vampire.
You're lying! That can't be!
Why would I lie to you? You must accept the truth.
Please, tell me you're lying.
She is not a vampire yet, to be precise. She won't even be aware of it. But as time passes, she will gradually lose her humanity. Like my daughter.
Is there anything I can do?
The only thing would be to defeat Walter immediately.
After that gut-wrenching reveal, we soon get to where Leon asks Ronaldo whether or not the whip is effective against Walter. Ronaldo doesn't understand why he's asking this, however Leon then reveals that when he tried to strike Walter, nothing happened. This caused a fear to emerge within Ronaldo, thinking that the whip was ineffective this entire time, because he had hoped that the whip would actually work against Walter if someone else wielded it. However, that seems to not have been the case, and it was just ineffective this entire freaking time. Leon then asks Ronaldo if there's any way to enhance the whip's capabilities. In which Ronaldo replies with this.
Well, there is, but...
Tell me, I'll do anything!
Now let me ask you this. Can you kill that girl?
Ooh, drama. However, my narration once again cannot really match the tone of the scene that I'm going to describe, so I'm going to let the scene play out for itself once again.
What are you saying?
If you make the whip complete, you can destroy him. But in order to do that, you need a tainted soul. One that trusts you, and one that you can trust.
I abandoned everything in order to save Sarah. I could never do such a thing.
Even knowing she's not human, it's a difficult thing to do. I'm not surprised.
Is she really? Is Sarah really?
There's no doubt about it. I confirmed the bite mark. The fact that the barrier responded is proof above all else.
Sarah!
Did she overhear us just now?
Sarah!
Please, stay away.
Sarah, calm down. Did you hear us talking? It's okay. Please, trust me. I will save you. I will. You'll see.
I appreciate how you feel, but I have no time left.
No time?
I can feel it. My heartbeat is weakening, and my blood is growing cold. I can feel myself changing into something inhuman. If my soul can save others, then I won't die in vain. I do not want anyone else to suffer my fate.
Why?
Please, if you still love me, please grant me my final wish.
I cannot.
You dishonor yourself, Leon. How do you think Sarah feels?
I know, Ronaldo. I do know, but...
Leon, all that is needed now is your resolve.
Leon, I will be with you.
Ronaldo, what must I do?
So, you've decided. You must enter into a blood covenant with Sarah's soul. Focus your spirit on Sarah. All becomes one in infinity. The tainted soul joins his. Undesired and cursed soul. His blood accepts your hatred for the power to slay your kind. Now, use the whip against Sarah!
I swear to you, no more will suffer your fate!
Thank you, Leon.
Sarah.
You know, no matter how many times I rewatch that scene, that is by far, like, within my top 10 saddest Castlevania moments. So anyway, after crying for 15 minutes, they give Sarah proper burial. Ronaldo comes up behind Leon and tells him that the way he was able to perform that ritual was because it was within the book that was transcribed by Matthias. You know, for a guy who is very important to the story, we haven't seen him once. I wonder why that could be. Anyway, Ronaldo also shares his pity for Leon as he really feels bad for the guy. And Leon tells him that no matter what would have happened, it could not have been helped, as they needed to do what had to be done. And the only person held responsible is Walter Bernhard, and he's going to head to that castle, walk all those fucking stairs, and whip the shit out of him. But not before having to kill an Eldritch Horror within Walter's basement, and obtaining his orb. Yeah, nobody mentioned this, but it's quite important for you to progress. But anyway, after doing that, you finally head back all the way up to the Pagoda of the Misty Moon, walk up to the Master's Keep, and then boom, there is Walter Bernhard waiting for him. Walter welcomes him again with a giant smirk on his face, as he knows exactly what he had done. Considering that all of this was pre-planned. Like a cruise. Anyway, Leon tells Walter that he will never forgive him for the shit that he did. And yeah, rightfully so. He does additionally state though that with this newfound gift, he now has the power to defeat Walter. And you can tell by the smug look on his face that Walter does not believe a single word that came out of his mouth. So, the two begin to brawl, as Walter soon finds out that Leon was not kidding, as now his attacks can go through his shield. Now that his shield is gone though, Leon now believes that nothing is able to protect Walter now. However, Walter refutes this and says that although his shield is gone, the night is still full. So he's going to teach Leon a thing or two about fucking with a vampire. If only he actually did that. Instead, what happens, Walter's now questioning himself as to how the fuck did Leon beat him to begin with, considering how much of an advantage that Walter had. However, Leon would like him to make sure that whatever he had done to Ronaldo and Sarah and himself, it would be paid in kind. However, even if Walter were to die, he states that he'll just come back again, and still look on for the Crimson Stone. Oh, if only what happened next did not happen.
I will surely come back to life. I could not obtain the Crimson Stone. But someday, it will be mine. No! You betrayed me! I shall take your soul!
So yeah, death had seemingly been under Walter's employ this entire time. Until he seemingly wasn't. And now he serves the Master of the Crimson Stone, who is suddenly revealed to be none other than our tactitious friend Matthias Kronqvist. Wow, I did not see this coming. Now, I already dissected this entire scene in my Who is the Best Dracula video. However, I'll gladly re-summarize everything that happens beyond this point. So this entire scene is practically Matthias's entire revenge story being explained out in full. As, remember how in the prologue that it stated that Elizabetha died, and how Matthias was bedridden? Well, chances are it was probably lying about the bedridden part, because there's no way in shit that Matthias was actually bedridden while he was orchestrating this entire thing. Oh yeah, he orchestrated the entire game to happen. Since day fucking one. Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if he also planned Justine's murder. However, to further explain why, he did all this because he felt that God had betrayed his trust because all he ever wanted was God to protect his wife. And when God did not do that, he felt betrayed and wanted revenge against God for taking the only thing that he ever loved in his life. Which, if you ask me, is very fucking sad. Matthias also tells Leon that he could grant him the same immortal life that he now has, as now he's probably dealing with grief and the same sort of grief that he has been feeling. so that the two of them can remain friends for immortality to come. However, Matthias made a very crucial mistake. 1. He admitted that he was the reason as to why Sarah was dead in the first place. And I don't know about you, but if you're a friend of mine, and you revealed to me that you are the reason why my betrothed is now dead, I would fucking wanna have your head on a silver platter. However, that's not why Leon refuses his offer. No. Remember that promise that Sarah had made to him? Yeah, that also applies to him and everyone that, exists on the planet. Because he does not want anyone else to share the same fate that Sarah once did. And Matthias did not take that into account. So, after the two continued to talk about it for about a minute or so, Matthias then chooses to leave on a bittersweet feeling. Yes, he got the immortality and power that he wanted, but now he had lost a friend in the process, and chances are the next time they meet, or their families meet, it won't be a pretty sight. Regardless, Leon wants Matthias to stop. However, he is soon intercepted by Death, who now is going to try and get his soul too. However, you can all guess how successful Death was in doing that. Anyway, after this happened, Leon drops the hardest quote that the Castlevania series has ever heard of. Which is funny considering how nobody usually tends to remember where this quote came from. Spoiler alert, it came from this moment.
I see. Give him this message. You have become a cursed being, and I will never forgive you. This whip and my kinsmen will destroy you someday. From this day on, the Belmont clan will hunt the night!
However, Leon does not have much time to wait, as the castle begins to crumble as its master is no longer present. And since Walter seems to be no more, neither does the Ebony Stone, which means that the Eternal Night has finally become finite. Ronaldo looks on into the sunset as he now learns that Leon was able to defeat Walter, and all seems to be right with the world. Leon walks away from the destroyed castle, ready to embark on whatever new adventure may wait for him. But yeah, that was the entire story of Lament of Innocence. As you can probably tell, or not, because I tried keeping a neutral tone, I really do love the story of Lament of Innocence. It's by far one of my favorite stories in the entire series, aside from maybe Curse of Darknesses and Harmony of Dissonances. However, I couldn't ask for a better way to represent what really started this whole series of games, cause it's almost poetic. Also, recall when I said to remember that one Walter quote when he said the thing about the night? Would you like to guess who he was referring to? If you answered anything that wasn't Matthias, then congratulations, you have excellent foresight. It's kind of a shame that not many people like to give Lament of Innocence's story any credit, considering that, comparatively speaking, it's really one of the most solid stories that we have within the series. Sure, there's some really goofy moments because of, how the game looks, but I assure you, look past it, and you look at the characters as like actual people within these scenarios, and you get to see a world of magic that I have kind of Stockholmed my syndrome into. But I assure you, the story of this game is amazing, and I can't have it any other way. However, something that a story requires in order for it to really stand out are the characters within it. as I've stated before, something that a game requires in order for it to be intriguing to many audiences is a cast of characters that are just as compelling as the story is. Starting us off, we have the main character himself, Leon Belmont. He is by far one of my favorite Belmonts, if not he's within my top 3. Granted, the game does not do him any favors by giving him one of the worst haircuts I've ever seen. However, if we ignore all that, Leon is an honorable, honest, and a very compelling character, and it makes me so sad that we never get to see him again after this, especially considering that in many of the spin-offs he would have been great. And every time he's referenced in other Castlevania media, I just get a little chuckle on my face. Overall, he's a great character, and I think he needs a lot more love than he usually gets. The next character we have to go over is Ronaldo Gandolfi, and I will say, for a character whose main role is essentially the shopkeeper, he has a lot to do with the story, and he's practically a secondary protagonist, just right next to Leon. He's just as important to the story as everyone else is. In fact, a lot of the elements within the story we only find out because of his involvement. As far as his character is concerned, he's wise, he's very intelligent, and he's very well spoken. Granted, he can be rough around the edges, but once you get to know him, he's a great guy. I will also say this, he has one of the better looking models in the game. However, the only character who has a really good model is a character I'm going to get to very soon. Next character up on the list is Sarah Trontoul, and although we really don't get to see her on screen very much, I do find it very warming that such a minor character is so influential to the plot. I don't think we give damsels in distress enough credit, because they're sort of the reason as to why the story gets kicked off in the first place. Like characters like Selena, Annette, Lydie, all of them are super integral to the story, and it just irks me that people say that, oh, they're not important, why should we care about them? Actually, a woman does not need to be like Bayonetta or Lara Croft just to get an audience to like her. And she doesn't need to be those things to be integral or important. Hell, just because she gets kidnapped does not mean that she's a weak person. She may be strong at heart, you don't know that. And to be fair, I don't know that either, but considering the dialogue that we've had with her, she has goodwill, and she definitely has good intentions, and she really does care about Leon and really the rest of humanity as a whole. Because without her willing to sacrifice herself in combining her soul with the Whip of Alchemy in order to save mankind, the Castlevania timeline would have looked a lot different, and believe me, people would start saying Lament of Innocence is not canon. So, there you go. So, in other words, please put respect on Sarah Trontoul's name and other characters like her. And speaking of women, we have Succubus. Can I just say that I don't like her and move on? Like, I'm sorry, but when it comes to sexualization, there's two different kinds. There's the Bayonetta kind of sexualization, and then there's this. Granted, her art is pretty cool, but her character really isn't, considering that yes, I know succubuses are meant to lust over things all the time, but that doesn't mean I have to approve of it. The less I see of succubus, the less I hear of succubus, and the less I think about succubus, the world would be a better place for it. Moving on, we have Medusa, and frankly, there's not really much character to be discussed here. Granted, it's Medusa, I don't know what you were expecting here. She's cocky, arrogant, she basically has all the personalities of a lackey. Next up on the list is Yahim Amster, and oh my word, he is amazing. Granted, it is such a shame that we really do not get any more time with him after the few minutes that we do get to spend with him, as he is genuinely an interesting character, and I really wish that we could have a game that goes back into his past. However, that is just me. From the things that we've been able to see of Yahim, he's prideful, arrogant, full of himself, and he is very vengeful. Something that I can really get behind. And he's also a vampire. What is there not to like? Another thing I like to point out is that Yahim's design is amazing. I truly admire it. The silverish hair, the indigo clothing, the black and white armor on his chest. Ah, it's beautiful. Next up on the list is none other than Walter Bernhard himself. And I already made a 30-minute video discussing why I like this bastard so much, so if you want to check that out, you can. But here's the TLDR in case you guys still want to watch this and move on. Basically, I like Walter because A, he has a great personality, B, he has one of the best Castlevanias in the entire series, C, I really can get behind his motives, and oh my god, is he an evil bastard, D, he is fucking hot, and E, compared to Dracula, or a character that we'll get to in a minute, he's more of an interesting fellow, as, comparatively speaking, I prefer everything that Walter has to offer rather than what Dracula has. Speaking of Dracula, Matthias Kronqvist, one of the most intriguing characters within the entirety of Castlevania. It is such a shame that we never get a character like him again, even though we see him all the fucking time. Matthias Kronqvist is an interesting case, and just like Walter Bernhard before him, I have made a whole video dedicated to why I like this bastard so much. But, like with Walter again, I'm going to do the TLDR. 1. His motivations are very easy to get behind, and it's pretty understandable as to why he does the things that he does. In other words, he's relatable. 2. His personality is very alluring, and if he were to try and charm me, I'm sure he would succeed within the first second. 3. I really dig Matthias' design, as I think Hayao Kojima did an excellent job in crafting this wonderful character. And 4th, holy shit is he hot.
The horny is no more.
However, we have one last character to go over, and it's the final character that we have to encounter within the game. That being Death himself. Now, although he really doesn't do much in the grand scheme of things, he is pretty cool. His design is one of the most interesting in the series, and I think it's one of the more eye-catching. His voice in the series is definitely the best I've heard. It definitely beats what he had in Curse of Darkness, I can tell you that.
Soon my master will enter Isaac's body. Though you were favored, Isaac will do. Dracula will once more walk the night.
And as for you, it is time for you to die.
And as far as everything else goes, yeah, it's pretty solid. But to brush up everything, I love almost every character within this game, and I think that each of the characters complement each other within the story and just flat out their personalities just work off each other. Everyone is an interesting bunch, and it is why I can safely say that Lament of Innocence has one of the most intriguing roster of characters to ever grace the Castlevania series. The gameplay for Lament of Innocence is... how do I put it? It's nothing like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta by any means, but it's leagues better than Sonic Unleashed. I'm sure I pissed someone off. Regardless though, this game primarily focuses on you learning combos, and in order to learn combos, you need to learn them by practically just playing the game, as I can't really tell you any distinct manner as to how to unlock each of these combos. From what I recall, I basically was just playing the game and goofing around, and then boom, bam, I discovered a new combo. However, despite me saying that this game's combo system isn't too advanced, for what it is, it's actually quite fun, as it feels very enjoying to just whip the shit out of these creatures. It reminds me of the good old days.
What do you mean by that?
However, other than the combos, you also have to manage your items and your relics. To go over the relics, because there's less to go on, the relics essentially allow you to use a certain type of move that the relic contains. However, it's at the expense of your MP bar, which, to be fair, considering that you gain MP by parrying, it really isn't all too bad. Wow, I can't believe another game copied from Dark Souls, I can't believe this. Someone called Pyrocynical, I think we found another one. But, all joking aside, there are 10 different relics that you can choose from. However, if you ask me, the most important one has to be the Wolf's Foot. More so because it lets you go at the speed of fucking sound, and frankly, if you played any Castlevania game, you would understand that movement is key. So, whatever thing enhances your movement capabilities is obviously the best item. You also have a lot of the series staples like Rosario's, Heart max-ups, HP max-ups, MP max-ups, and a whole bunch of other things like coins, which basically are a commodity that you need to get in order to buy things from Ronaldo, who, of course, sells you a lot of random shit. However, a lot of the items that you'll be coming into contact with throughout the game are either maps, markers, or keys that lead into special rooms that can only be unlocked with said key. However, getting these keys can sometimes be a pain in the actual ass. Then, once you get these keys, you will also be able to get other items that allow you to unlock certain other areas that were unable to be unlocked previously. Such things such as the Unlock Jewel, which basically allows you entry into the Prison of Eternal Torture. You also have ancient texts that basically give you hints as to what to do in the area that you're in. The most famous one being the Ancient Text number 1, which highlights the following description. Meth means death. Emeth means life. If you don't understand what that means you had to grab the E-tablet and insert it where it says meth, in which that activates the Golem boss fight within the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory. Like in previous Castlevania games before Lament of Innocence, you are also able to obtain different gems that you can take to Ronaldo and sell them for a quick buck. If you find them, you know exactly what to use them for. You also have a ton of accessories and armor that you get to customize Leon with. Granted, none of these changes will be visual, but definitely in the statistics department. This is why this game is considered an RPG instead of just an action game. And since there are so many different armors to choose from, you can go based on your fancies, as I won't tell you specifically as to what playstyle is best, as there are so many different combinations that you can play with that practically it's limitless. Then comes the weapon variety, or should I say lack thereof, as the only different weapons that you'll be getting during Leon's campaign is the different whips that you can get throughout the entire game. Granted, most of the whips come from the elemental boss fights, like the fire elemental, the ice elemental, and the electricity elemental, which means that the only remaining whip that you'll be obtaining is through story purposes, with that being the Vampire Killer. The Vampire Killer is the best whip in the game, so there's really no point in transferring to any other whips after you obtain it. However, if you don't have the Vampire Killer yet, you can primarily focus your attention on any of the 4 whips that I've just highlighted, as they're all good in their own right. Oh, but if you think we're done, oh, we are not even close. Because there is a certain thing in Lament of Innocence that I have neglected to mention up until this point, and it's something that Harmony of Dissonance did quite very well, and that is the sub-items. Basically, any sub-items that were in Harmony of Dissonance, you can expect them to show up here, with minor differences. For example, the Sacred Fist sub-item from Harmony of Dissonance is no longer in this game, and instead was replaced by the Crystal sub-item. So similarly to what I did in my Harmony of Dissonance review, I'm going to go over each of the sub-items and each of their variations, and of course I'm going to go from worst to best in my opinion. Whatever your opinions are of the sub-items is yours alone, so if you have any disagreements, or if you agree with anything I say, you can leave a nice little comment. But with that out of the way, let's move on to the sub-items. To no one's surprise, though, a sub-weapon has to be the dagger. Sure, you can launch this thing at a pretty consistent rate, but the fact that this dagger does so little damage, it's practically useless. Now granted, it's better than having nothing, but at this rate, when you have the whip, what's the point of using the damn dagger? Like, come on, Leon, it feels like you're shooting them with Nerf bullets. Then we have the ability called Needle Claws, which allows you to summon needles from the ground that impale your target for a short period of time. Surprisingly, they don't do that much damage either, so all they really do is stun the enemy in place, which, to be fair, most sub-items already do to begin with, so really, once again, put it in the useless pile. Then we have Magic Missile, which, although it doesn't do anything better than Needle Claws in the damage department, at least you can make the excuse that you can send it from afar and it'll actually hit, as it's basically like a homing missile towards the enemies. Plus, it's pretty satisfying to pull off. But with like most variations of the dagger, you can practically get the same effect with different sub-items. So really, what the hell is the point? I will be generous though and say that this variation of the dagger is one of the better combos that you can have. So if you have the dagger and the purple orb, I recommend using that most of the time. If you are stone cold in your ways of the dagger, or you're just fucking Australia. Speaking of useless, here is the triple dagger, which is exactly as advertised. Essentially all it is that you're sending 3 daggers at once instead of the regular 1 that you get in the base variation. For some reason, the people at Konami thought this was a revolutionary idea, and it really just does the same thing that the dagger does, except now you waste 3 hearts to send out 3 daggers individually. For the same fucking damage. Once again, better than nothing, but chances are you're gonna be saved by your whip more times than the 2 additional daggers that the game decided to give you. So really, just don't fucking use it. Then we have the Force Cannon, and if any of you have played Harmony of Dissonance before, this ability will probably be very familiar to you, as it's literally just a Sacred Fist with the Wind Tome, except now it's in a 3D environment. So you'd think it would be just as useful as its Sacred Fist counterpart, but believe it or not, no. Because since now you're in a 3D environment, you now actually have to do the one thing that you didn't have to in the 2D game, which is aim. However, other than that, practically it's the same thing. It's surprisingly good, and it doesn't waste your hearts all that much. Plus, it does a lot of freaking damage. So, if you ever get the chance, use it. Because it's actually one of the few dagger combinations that are actually pretty good. Also, Hadouken. Have to have that obligatory Street Fighter reference somewhere. Next up is the Astral Knife, which surprisingly is actually pretty effective. What it basically does is summon a ring of knives around you and launches them faster than a Romanian can pick up your wallet. Surprisingly, this speed actually does damage. So, if you ever have the chance to actually pick this up, I absolutely recommend you use it. Chances are, though, it's going to be a drain on your hearts, but considering how common hearts tend to be in this game, I'm sure you'll be just fine. Plus, the plus side to this weapon is that it locks on to practically anything. So once it's in its sights, that thing will probably die within the next coming seconds. Next up is the Blade Serpent, and despite being a Black Orb ability and sounding pretty cool on paper, it's really bad. For some reason, the hit detection on this item is a little wonky. Like, sure, it does good damage, but since the hit detection is a little off, you will probably have to deal with the enemies a lot longer than you'd wish. Now, granted, I believe that this ability is made for larger enemies. However, even then, like I said, hit detection. This ability was done better in Curse of Darkness, where it was a special ability that only Trevor had access to, where he would hold on to one of the shoulder buttons and then press the sub-item button. Regardless, though, it can be good, it's just that don't rely on it too much. Like with most dagger weapons, it primarily excels at stunning the enemy, so just use it for that. Then we have the Spread Gun. Okay, holy shit, that came out a lot faster than I thought. So yeah, when I first used this sub-item, I was shocked at how fast and powerful this thing was. It is exactly like the Force Cannon, except now it has an explosive radius. And on top of the fact that it does a lot of damage, or similar damage to the Force Cannon, it also does a shit ton of knockback. God, if Leon used this on the Japanese, I think the war would have ended a lot sooner. So yeah, out of all the dagger combinations, I'd say this one is probably the best combination. Does a lot of damage, does a lot of knockback, doesn't consume your hearts too much, and it comes out very quickly, so you don't have to wait at all in order to use it. This next sub-item was kind of hard to pinpoint, but over some deliberation, I finally decided that the sub-weapon that comes after the dagger is the axe. Now, hear me out. The default axe is good enough as it is. You launch 2 axes that orbit around each other, and the enemies get launched as so. There's really no problem with the default axe. The problem is the variations that the axe tends to have. To highlight this problem, we have the spinning edge. Essentially, it's an axe, but functions like a cross. And for some reason, it's worse than the default cross. Because although it's big and it has a wide hitbox to boot, for some reason the hit detection or the hit scans on the item itself are just bad, so it ends up only hitting the enemy twice or maybe even once. And for some reason the damage on the weapon is not that good, so chances are you would have to use multiple of these bad boys just to even get one enemy killed. Granted, it's great at securing an area and making sure that the enemies are stunned. However, the problem is that there's better weapons that can do exactly the same thing that this variation of the axe can do, except better. So yeah, great in concept, terrible in execution. Next is the Axe Tornado, which somehow functions even worse. Because although it summons a tornado of axes, the problem is that it's a stationary weapon. And I don't know if you know this, but the enemies in Lament of Innocence are not that stupid. So chances are, you'd have to wait for the enemies to just casually walk into the tornado, rather than, oh, I don't know, the enemies directly attacking you and then getting hit by the tornado. Because chances are, that won't happen. You have to walk right in front of the enemy in order for the tornado to actually do anything. And spoiler alert, the damage is not all that great. If I were to make this weapon, I think it would have been better if the tornado actually moved slowly forward. So then that way there's some movement going on, and then you have the possible chance of hitting an enemy. It's just that the main problem of this variation is that it doesn't move. Oh, believe me, but if you think that this variation is stupid, just you wait until the next few that we have to cover. Then we have the Spiral Axe, which surprisingly enough is one of the better axe combinations that you'll see in this list, as essentially it covers the room in axes that swirl around in a giant circle, or in better use, a spiral. It essentially is a room clearing type weapon, and I'd say it does its job pretty well. It knocks out the enemies pretty good, it does decent damage, and it has decent coverage to boot. So if you do find yourself in a sticky situation, I do recommend using the sub-item. Speaking of getting yourself out of a sticky situation, we have the High Speed Edge, which essentially is just a tackle move where essentially your hand becomes a giant axe and you dash through the entire room. For the mobility that it provides and the high amount of damage that this weapon actually does, I actually recommend using this one, as chances are it'll probably get you out of trouble and away from enemies as much as possible. However, if you are the special kind of person, chances are you will probably use this item to get yourself into trouble. God only knows. Next is the Spirit Ripper, and I'll be very fucking honest, I have no idea what the hell this is. Like, all I know is that it follows you around and does some really pathetic damage to the enemies. Like, seriously, what the hell is this? It's great for stunning enemies, but like I've said multiple times now, if you wanted to stun an enemy, you can either just kill them outright, or just find better weapons to do so. Why does this even exist?
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
It's like they tried doing one of the combinations from Harmony of Dissonance, but it just ended up like this. And it sucks too, because if this did more damage, it probably would have been one of the best axe combos in the game. However, it just stands to not only be the worst axe combo, but one of the worst combos in general. So yeah, don't use this unless you're fond of game overs. Up next is the Rapid Slash, where essentially Leon becomes a guest character from Tekken and starts using the 10-hit combo that he learned from Kazuya Mishima. Although the damage is in the 20s, the amount of times you are allowed to hit the enemy with this combo is absolutely absurd, and it shreds the enemy's health like my Testament shreds literally everything in Guilty Gear. If you want to use this weapon variation, you are absolutely allowed to do so, as there's really no faults in you using it, does good damage at a consistent rate, and has a large hitbox to boot. So, if you do use it, you will absolutely be the Kazuya Mishima within your field. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the Axe Trap, where essentially it's the same issue with the Axe Tornado, except somehow it's worse. It's not there for as long, and the damage is even worse. So, everything I said about the Axe Tornado is amplified to literal 10. If Spirit Ripper didn't exist, this combination would be the worst axe combo. So yeah, don't use it unless you hate yourself. Up next after the axe is the Crystal, and surprisingly for a mediocre weapon, it surprisingly has some pretty good variations. Before we get into those variations though, allow me to explain the essential principles of what the Crystal does. Essentially, it's like putting a landmine in the middle of the air, waiting for an enemy to approach, and then bada bing bada boom, a family no longer has a father. But now that we understood the core principles of the crystal and how it essentially functions, we can now move on to the variety of different versions of this one sub-item. First one on the chopping block is the Hail Crystal, and I don't know if you know this, but we're summoning back the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. Essentially what this does is that it brings a giant shard of a crystal and drops it onto the enemy, doing high explosive damage. If the name of the ability has not given it away, it is straight up a carbon copy of the same one from Harmony of Dissonance, and if you're wondering what that one was called Hailstone, and they basically function the same way. Except only this time, the Hail Crystal has explosive damage and it actually locks onto the target, so there's no chances of you missing this one. As you can see, we're off to a great start. The next ability we have to look at is Shadow Plane, and essentially what it is. I could have sworn that I said something, yet I can't for the life of me remember. In essence, Shadow Plane looks very similar to how King Crimson's ability of time skipping works, and it essentially is a move that basically kills all the enemies on screen without much of a forethought. This move is definitely useful when you are stuck in a pickle, as not only does it do high damage, but it also does high knockback. So, if you need to escape any situation, You can simply use this and opt out faster than Diavolo trying to opt out of fatherhood. Overall, great move. Unfortunately, all these variations can all be good. Look where the fuck it is. And currently, we now have to deal with the Mash Crystal. I'm going to be very fucking honest. I literally see no difference between this and the regular crystal, if you ask me. They both do the same thing, they both do the same damage, and they practically just cost as much. The only difference is that I feel like I can spam these rather than the actual regular crystal. I mean, if you like using the regular crystal, then I'm sure you'll be content with this, but honestly, I see no reason to use this. Next we have Health Drain, and frankly, like any move that drains the health of your enemies, it does weak damage and gives you a weak upside. You mean to tell me I can recover 8 health out of my hundreds of health that I have in reserve, just so I can do 12 damage to the enemy? Say no more, take my frickin' crystal! Yeah, I feel bad for any fool that believes that this weapon is actually viable. Next is Satellite, and it basically works the same way as many of the cross combinations did in Harmony of Dissonance, where essentially you'll have 4 crystals circle around you, and that's basically about it. Apparently, it also homes on to enemies, but chances are you're probably going to be close to the enemies anyway, so to be quite honest, the homing feature is kind of redundant. I mean, it's not a bad variation, there's definitely worse that we've seen, but how can you say yes to this but no to the fucking boat sinker? At least that has a kill to death ratio. Next up though is Vanish Storm, one of the most useful variations of the crystal that I frankly have seen. Not only does it have a massive area of attack, but it does a whole bunch of damage, and it's practically like a tsunami made out of wind. And upon thinking about it, I just described a hurricane. In essence, Leon can now summon winds that make Hurricane Katrina look like a gust of wind. And I don't know about you, but I prefer if nature's air conditioning went into overdrive every now and again. I'm telling you, it gets way too hot. And lastly, the last variation of the crystal is Judgment. I already made a frickin' 2-hour video on you, why the hell are you still here? Anyway, what this move does is basically summon rays of light from the heavens and basically bombard the enemies until they can no longer feel the heavens. I'm telling you, if the Catholics could do this fucking shit, I think they would have won the Crusades a lot sooner. But nah, let's burn heretics. However, this one by far is one of the best crystal variations, if you ask me anyway. Because it not only does it do massive damage and it goes on for a hot minute, but you can also use this against bosses, which is pretty nice. Especially ones like the Forgotten One, which I'm sure I'll get to later. Alright, the next 2 sub-items can practically be replaced with one another, as it practically just depends on preference. So, essentially what I'm saying is that these 2 sub-items are the best sub-items in the game. To start us off though, we have Holy Water. Now granted, the regular holy water is kind of tricky to use, however, what I've found to be the most effective is by jumping and then using the said sub-item to actually hit targets. However, if you just use it on the ground, that works too. It's just that your margin of error is more higher than it is when you're actually bouncing all over the place. So overall, great base weapon, just a little tricky to use. However, we can now move on to the variations. First up is Energy Gazer, which essentially is a stream of fire that basically homes in on enemies, and does quite the knockback. However, when I say homes in on enemies, you're gonna have to take a little bit of salt with that, as it really doesn't lock onto enemies in the conventional sense. It just focuses on the general direction of where the enemy is, and just goes in that said direction until it just disappears. But hey, at least the damage is decent. Next is Crossblazer, and essentially, it's a weapon that allows you to jump into the air and then punch the ground and emit a giant cross from it, doing massive amounts of damage. It's one of those weapons that it's very good to basically clear out the room as quick as possible, as if you need to go somewhere, you need to go somewhere, so I don't blame anyone for having to use this item. Or you just like the immense amounts of power that is on your fingertips, and you want to unleash that power onto all your enemies that you see fit. Which in that case... how tyrannical. Anyway, it's a good variation. Next up is Roaring Flames, and essentially it does what the base Holy Water does, except this time it likes to go back for seconds. If you like using the base Holy Water, then chances are you probably use this one as well, as you love the destructive power that is within your... circle of the moon. Next is Flame Sparks, which essentially you throw a blue fireball at the enemy, which then explodes into smaller fireballs that basically do a lot of cumulative damage. Don't get it twisted, only one of those fireballs really can't do that much damage. It's that there's so many of them that the enemy has no idea what the hell is going on. I guarantee you, if you were carrying all this shit in Nightmare of Elm Street, Freddy Krueger wouldn't even touch you with a 20-foot pole. But yeah, surprisingly it does a lot of damage, so I'd say use it when you can. Next we have the Holy Symbol, and oh my fucking god, we were so close to having a perfect streak. They basically took the core principles of the Crystal sub-item, and just somehow made it worse. Like I've stated before, there's really no reason as to why you would need traps in Lament of Innocence, considering that none of the enemies are this stupid enough to walk right into them. Granted, they might, I don't know how their AI works, but from my experience, I know that their AI is smart enough to navigate through a lot of your bullshit. So chances are, this move would practically be completely useless unless you were to walk right up to them and perform the said move. Which, I don't know if you know this, but if you tried doing this against a Cyclops, chances are you would have been knocked against a freaking wall. So yeah, if you ask me, high risk, low reward. Don't use it unless you're a masochist. Next we have Energy Wave, and oh my god, this is literally Energy Geyser. Yeah, I shit you not, it's literally the same move, except this time it actually homes in on the enemies. And it's blue! You know what, forget anything I said about the Energy Geyser. Clearly just use this, because it is by far the superior version of whatever the hell Energy Geyser was. If you are using Energy Geyser, you are two things. Either you have no idea where the fucking black orb is or how to unlock it, or you probably haven't gotten to that stage of the game yet, or you're freaking stupid. There is no reason to go back to Energy Geyser when you are using this. The last holy water variation is the Aqua Disc, and I will be very frank with you, when I first used this item, I was kinda confused as to what its purpose was. I thought it was like every other item where you just press the button once and then boom, there you go. However, it then made me think about all other sub-items when I realized that you have to hold onto it in order for it to do prolonged area of effect damage, which is what it specializes in. Plus, the damage is actually pretty average, and the area of effect is not too bad either. So I wouldn't be against anyone using this form of the holy water. Just remind yourselves that you have to hold on to the suckle button rather than pressing it once. Once you got that narrowed down, you'll practically be on to success. And now the last sub-weapon that we have to cover, to no one's surprise, is the cross. Compared to all the other sub-weapons that are within this game, this one is by far the best one to choose from. Granted, there are two types of people in Lament of Innocence. People who like to have the hand of God on their side, or people who like rain. But anyway, to really get down into specifics, the regular cross isn't all that good. I know, we're all surprised. For some reason, they thought that doing what the axe did would be too repetitive, so instead, they chose to make the base cross do exactly what one of the variations of the crystal did. You guys are idiots. Base cross does poor damage, and the only reason why someone would ever use it is if they don't have any of the orbs unlocked yet, or they're just looking for an item that can hit stun the enemies. Which, like I've said throughout these entire sections thus far, if you want a weapon to do exactly what you want it to do, then why on God's green earth choose a version of that weapon that does not do it efficiently? So yeah, if you just want something what the crystal did, then yeah, just stick to the crystal, don't switch to the base cross. Next up is the Divine Cross, which essentially summons a giant cross in front of you and basically acts as a separator between you and the heretics. You would think that a weapon like this would be very useful and would come in very handy in most situations. Well then, I have a newspaper to sell you. It does absolutely none of what you think it does. Instead, it does exactly what the base cross does, except now you only have one area that you have to do it in. Plus, it has to be directly in front of you at all freaking times. So if you have an enemy right behind you, congratulations, the Divine Cross will not be protecting you at all. And besides, it's not like it does a good job protecting you to begin with. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that this was a joke weapon, considering that the primary use that this variation of the cross does is essentially doing a badass walk in the middle of the hallway, while you just let a giant wall do all the damage for you. Despite my complaints of it, however, there are potential uses for it, it's just that I have not seen any that would suit me. So yeah, if you have any uses for this damn thing, you can sure as hell leave a comment. The next variation is Michael's Sword, and essentially what that one does is essentially... Okay, out of all the variations of the cross that we've been discussing thus far, the last thing you would have expected is for me to start rambling about how good a frickin' nuclear airstrike is in this game. But oh my god, that's exactly what Michael's sword is. This variation of the cross is essentially a giant fuck you to literally anything that is within your vicinity. Because my word, if you wanted to scare the Japanese with the good word of the Lord, there's nothing more tangible than this. No, and if you think this is a screen wipe weapon, oh, you be surely mistaken. Because once that cross detonates, it's gonna be there for a hot minute. Because if an enemy walks into the fiery cross that you now see before you, it will then be launched into the air and take fire damage. Which, oh my god, but from the already high damage that the base attack does, the aftermath is essentially putting alcohol and salt onto an open wound. If any of you just flinched at how painful that probably sounds, you can imagine how these skeletons are probably feeling right about now. But yeah, Michael's sword is definitely one of the must-use variations of the cross out there. If you're not using it, what the hell are you doing? Next up is double cross, and you have got to be fucking kidding me right now. This is literally just the basic cross, except now you have 5 crosses. And if you're wondering if it does any more or less damage, well, congratulations. It does 1 plus damage. Essentially, anything I said about the default cross goes exactly for the double cross. Just because you have a bigger radius does not make it any better. In fact, the only thing going for this variation is the name. I just find saying double cross very funny. Fortunately for us though, the next variation is Holy Light, and if you ever wanted to hit your lover, or ex-lover per se, I don't judge, with the same amount of force that an oncoming train can easily hit a pack of wheat, then I have some good news for you. This does the same amount of damage as Michael's sword does, so if you're looking for something to have a heavy hit, then I can surely recommend this. However, the only problem is that it's basically a straight shot. If you miss, you're fucked. And upon being hit by the Holy Light, enemies do not get launched back as you would think they would. Because, you know, laws of physics. But I assure you, the drawbacks of this weapon definitely do not outshine the rewards, as you're able to do tons of damage and unleash the attack very quickly. So there's practically no reason to not use this. Plus, you'd think this would be a drain on your hearts, but nope, not really. So spam this to your content. Next up is Grand Cross, and if any of you have played Smash Brothers or played a Castlevania game before, then chances are you know exactly what this move is. And for those uninitiated are wondering whether or not this move is actually as good as everyone says it is, I don't know, ask the skeletons. Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to see anything, or any boss in this game for that matter, that would want to get sucked up by this thing. Now sure, altogether it doesn't do the same amount of damage as something like Michelle's sword or the Holy Light, however, cumulative speaking, it does a bunch of damage that I'm pretty sure, like I said prior, nobody wants to get sucked up by this thing. So, if you would like, use this to your heart's content, as it too is not a drain to your heart as you probably think it is. Granted, it won't be a soft punch, but it won't be a hard one either. Next up is Six Saints, and frankly, this one can be a little contentious, as although it launches lasers from 6 points, essentially like a freaking battle station from Star Wars, it doesn't have that big punch like something that the Holy Light and the Fat Man have. However, like the Grand Cross, in my personal opinion, it does just as much of a good job at taking care of enemies as any other option is. I mean hell, this is my go-to sub-item variation when it comes to taking down bosses. Not only because it's effective, but it's also damn cool watching lasers get sent from the 6 crosses and at the enemy. I also like envisioning it like a battle station. Because, you know, vampires are allowed to have imaginations too, you know. And the last one for the crosses is the Agnia, and do any of you remember that sub-weapon from Symphony of the Night? Do any of you remember how good it was? No? Good, because it never was good to begin with. Yeah, it's kind of a shame to end the crosses section on a sour note, but to be quite frank with you, it's just not that good of a variation. Like sure, you send lightning from your fingertips, but the problem is that it does not do consistent good damage to begin with. It works the same way as the Aqua Disc, meaning that you have to hold on to the circle button for a longer period of time in order to unleash it for a longer period. However, the only issue is that you're not doing area of effect damage, which is what made the Aqua Disc at least viable. Instead, all you're doing is just doing a consistent stream of damage that, to be honest, doesn't do all that much damage. So, what is my favorite slogan for this section? What is the point of using this weapon if there are better alternatives? Alright, now that we got all the sub-items covered, allow me to go over small little things that I wasn't able to go through during the beginning of this section, but happily able to go through now. Let me start off by saying this. The way you have to equip your items or your sub-weapons in this game is very stupid. For some odd reason, the devs decided to enlist two menus. For some reason, the basic menu, with Leon at the side and everything displaying what you have, for some reason that is not the menu that you're supposed to equip or either use items from. Instead, what you have to do is move one of the analog sticks in order to activate the menu, which for some fucking reason is so compacted that it makes me feel anxious. I honestly don't know why they decided to do this, other than maybe that it'll be faster, but I don't think I could have named any other person who would have been troubled by just going to the menu, equipping an item, or using an item for that matter, and then just leaving the menu and entering back into the game. But now you have this weird clusterfuck of a system that now people are gonna complain about because it just feels very weird. Oh, and the puzzles for Lament of Innocence. Oh my lord. Some of them are quite simple, like getting the white orb, because all you have to do there is basically beat the elemental bosses and then hit a statue with the fire and ice whip. However, then there are other puzzles that require parkour, which, I will be honest, parkour is not this game's specialty. There are times where it feels very Devil May Cry 1-esque, where it should work, in theory, but in practice it just ends up with you constantly falling off ledges and into the bottomless pit below where you have to do the freaking puzzles over again. Conveniently enough, this also happens in the Anti-Mystery Souls Laboratory, the same area where you have to get the white orb. Then there's the parry mechanic, which I probably brought up once, but I want to go over it again here. The parry system is not my favorite. It works, believe me, but it also doesn't. Now granted, it's not like it's hard or anything to figure out when to parry, because the game will make sure that you know exactly at what times you needed to parry. However, this system only works if you're going against one enemy, which chances are, in many of the rooms in Lament of Innocence, that will just not be the case. And there are just some enemies in this game that are just super hard to parry, like it's not even funny. Oh, and if you believe the bosses are any easier, no, you are surely mistaken. In fact, the only bosses that I can really name from memory that are practically easy to parry or just are parry farms are the elementals. But that's because the freaking patterns of attack are so choreographed that you can literally see them from 10 miles away. Hell, I'm pretty sure Helen Keller could see their attacks coming. However, to wrap up my opinions on the gameplay, it's nothing too fantastic, you know? Like, it feels great and it functions well enough. However, it doesn't make me feel like the overall badass Belmont that I possibly could be. Now sure, it's amazing to see Leon fucking do tricks and flips all over the damn place, but it just doesn't feel there, you know? Like, it doesn't feel the same sort of thing as doing combos in Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. Which, may I add, Devil May Cry already had 2 games in the series before Lament of Innocence even came out. Now granted, both of those games, in retrospect to the entire series, are not that good. And, comparatively speaking, Lament of Innocence has a better gameplay style than those 2 games combined. However, if we are to look at the rest of the Devil May Cry series, you can definitely see why people prefer those games because due to the action-packed nature and the combo system that those games have, which is kind of what I wanted Lament of Innocence to have. But hey, if Konami chooses to make a game, or chooses to remake this game, I would happily love to see that happen. Not that it will though, because you know, Konami. But we must be hopeful for the future. Or maybe that's just me coping. But, with all that being said though, I think the gameplay in Lament of Innocence is very good. It's just that if there were additional things that would help spice up the gameplay a bit, I think that would have made the gameplay a 10 out of 10 for me. However though, the gameplay sits at a comfortable 7 to 8 out of 10, so to be honest, I'd take that win. Something that can make a castle infamous is the residents within it. And, like many other castles within the Castlevania franchise, Lament of Innocence's castle is no different and is somehow even more plagued with some ridiculous nonsense. In fact, allow me to recite a poem to you that will basically describe all the enemies that you will encounter within this game. If they fly, you are probably going to die. If they are big, get ready to be launched like a stick. If they have claws, from below as well they'll stab. If they have shields, Pray that they don't have spiritual ones either. If they look like a fish, you will die from Sonic the Fishhog. If they are floating swords, annoyance will follow soon after. If they run on all fours, prepare to try and leave via the door. If they are skeletons, they're pretty cool. Unless your name is the Skeleton Flower. Yeah, a lot of the enemies in this game can be bundled up as pretty annoying. Because chances are the only easy enemies in this game are the skeletons and the ghosts, but even then there's some overlap. Literally, if you have any sort of flying enemy whatsoever, like a gargoyle or a lesser demon, you are probably going to die. Because the field of trying to hit them with literally anything that isn't your whip is practically nonsensical. Then there are the executioners and the cyclopses that do massive damage to you just for the basic crime of existing. Oh, but don't even get me started on the armors. My Christ, sometimes having to deal with their shield is one of the most annoying things imaginable. Especially if you're the Dullahan who has a spiritual shield that you can just say, fuck you, I'm not getting hit by any of your nonsense because I don't want to. It is an utter drag having to deal with them. But if you would like to know where most of the annoying enemies are, allow me to highlight the locations for you. Almost 100% of the time, the most annoying enemies are located within the Pagoda of the Misty Moon. Granted, you'd expect it because it's the final area of the game, but my Christ, they can easily outnumber you and outdamage you if they wanted to. Then for some odd reason, the next area up on this list is either the Ghostly Theater or the frickin' Dark Palace of Waterfalls. The fishermen in the Dark Palace of Waterfalls have no business as being annoying as they are. Then you have the Garden Forgotten by Time and then the Anti-Souls Mysteries Lab, which are both occupied by skeleton flowers that are the most annoying pieces of garbage imaginable. But if you had to argue which area was worse, I'd argue the garden, because there's so much nonsense going on there with the enemy placements and the types of enemies that you'll be encountering that it's not even funny. Hell, I think that's the area where you first get introduced to the gargoyle. Like I said, are there enemies that are probably pretty cool? Yeah, some of the armors and some of the demons and some of the skeletons are pretty cool to look at. It's just that the problem is that fighting them is an utter drag. If this game did not have a combo system, imagine how tedious having to deal with these enemies would be. Hell, imagine not having sub-items to deal with these guys. Oh my god, I would not want to play the game any further. But believe me, the enemy variation in this game is quite expansive, and the enemies look very cool. So, if there's anything positive to take from this, is that Lament of Innocence probably has one of the coolest designed enemies in the series, but that probably has more to do with the fact that they're in 3D and a lot of their animations are pretty cool in 3D, as in comparison to 2D, so maybe. But other than that though, I really have nothing more to say about the enemies than I already have. Like any other Castlevania game, there are of course going to be bosses that you will find throughout your journey. Some are fun, others cannot even entertain seniors at a retirement home. Then there are some that are easy, and then some others that can instantly qualify themselves to be in the next Dark Souls game. Point being though, bosses in the Castlevania series tend to be very diverse, and Lament of Innocence's selection of bosses is no different. You have some winners and you have some stinkers. And to highlight such things, allow me to go through each of the bosses and my opinions on them based on a ranking system. If any of you have watched my Harmony of Dissonance video and my Curse of Darkness video, then you know exactly what I'm about to do. Number 11. Doppelganger Fight 1. I'ma be honest, the doppelganger fights in this game don't offer anything substantial. And I mean, for crying out loud, it's a doppelganger fight. Usually I'm not a fan of these things unless it's a nice little reference when you're playing in an extra mode, but to have it as one of the base bosses is just something I do not agree with. And for a few reasons. The first reason is because I believe it's cheap. Like the doppelganger fights in Symphony of the Night, I don't think they offer anything substantial in the grand scheme of things. And instead if Doppelganger was relegated to an extra side piece of content like it was in Curse of Darkness, where you can only fight Doppelganger if you're playing as Trevor, then I would be fine with it, because it's an extra thing you can do. However, since it's not something you can just optionally do. You have to fight this fucker twice. Speaking of the second time, number 10, Doppelganger Fight 2. It is almost the exact same fight, minus the fact that this doppelganger now has more health and does a different attack pattern, which may I add is a little more annoying than the first. Any criticism that I had for the first doppelganger fight applies here. And another criticism I'd be willing to add is that literally any other boss could have gone in these two spots, but instead we have to deal with a Leon clone. And I'll tell you this, if I had to deal with a doppelganger for the third time in this game, I think I actually would have rioted. Number 9. Succubus. Other than the fact that her presence and cutscene make me want to actually hurl, her boss fight is a decent challenge, albeit it's a little ridiculous at times, as she's practically one of the only bosses who chooses to throw random shit into the ring and see if it sticks. What do I mean by this? Well, her main attack pattern is to summon flowers from the ground that do essentially nothing except get in your way of trying to hit her. Then you also have her sending out arrows of light, whether they be green or pink, that either do a spread out motion or just singularly target Leon. She also has the ability to duplicate herself, and upon seeing that, I can already imagine the dismay that is on everyone's faces at this moment. Believe me, I'd be the first person to have it. However, luckily for everyone, trying to figure out who the real succubus is not that difficult. Because luckily for some reason, if you just swing hard enough, you'll find the real one eventually. Hell, and if you're luckier, the first one you hit will be the actual succubus. But yeah, if I had to compare this to anything, it's like if you took the Symphony of the Night boss fight and practically just put it in a 3D environment, except somehow make it even more tedious. Did I forget to mention that this woman dodges you like you have the plague? Yeah, I'm sure that won't make things any more difficult. Oh, might I add, she also has the ability to cause paralysis, and if you're hit by said paralysis, have fun getting leeched on. One final thing to note, her boss theme isn't really the best out of the bunch. It's practically the weakest one I can think of. But I can't say that it doesn't suit the environment or her, at least. Number 8, Medusa. If you're looking for a boss with the most Metal Gear sounding theme in this OST, then congratulations, you have landed on Medusa. Other than the fact that her theme is just straight heat, her boss fight is practically easy, all things considered. Considering the primary move that she tries to use on you is either rolling into a ball like Sonic the Hedgehog or trying to turn you into stone with her freaking eyes, you have really nothing to worry about. Granted, you have the occasional blood coming out of her eyes, the constant stones that she uses for defense and offense, and the occasional attack where she'll decide to expel snakes out of her mouth, as disgusting as that sounds. However, one of her more common attacks is her trying to swipe you with her snakes. And by that, she'll try to use the snakes that are on her head as if they were hands. Which, if you do not know what that visual is like, I'm going to let your imagination figure that one out. However, I must say, the only attack that you really have to worry about is the snake attack, as that one is the most likely you'll be hit by. However, I think I can speak for the community on this one and say that I'd rather deal with Medusa in this game than any other Medusa or Medusa head that is seen throughout the series. And for the uninitiated, yes, Medusa heads are that annoying. Count our lucky stars that Lament of Innocence does not have them. Number 7. Golem. Other than being butchered in Castlevania Judgment for no particular reason, Golem in this game is most similar to his appearance from Harmony of Dissonance, as that boss and this boss share quite a few things. Firstly, using the concept that there's two phases, one with the outer shell and then the second with an inner core that has to be hit. However, unlike his Harmony of Dissonance counterpart, Golem in Lament of Innocence is actually a force to be reckoned with. Not only does he primarily attack with his freaking large-ass hands that hit like a damn truck, but he also uses jumping attacks that can paralyze you, so try not to get hit. He also has an ability where if he slams on the ground, rocks from the ceiling will descend onto the ground, so try not to get hit by those either. He also likes to block, so be wary of that. However, once you take care of that, he then moves on to his second phase where he'll lose his arm and his core will be exposed. However, something I like to add is that trying to hit the core is now a lot more difficult, as now trying to jump and hit the core would result in you getting smacked, so you have to time it just right. Luckily though, Golem performs a move where he essentially sends one of his hands as a ball and chain, and if he hits a wall, his hand will be stuck onto the wall for a while. So I'd recommend using that downtime to try and strike him at his weakest. Other than that though, nothing really changes. The only thing that changes is how hard he hits now. Last thing to note though is that his theme is absolutely magnificent, and the way you interact with the boss by trying to find the E-tablet and putting it into the wall is actually quite interesting to me, as there's a lot of biblical imagery to have here. But considering that you find him in the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory, the place with literal biblical imagery, it makes sense. Number 6. Undead Parasite. Okay, seriously, what is with Konami and making bosses look phallic? Hell, for the uninitiated, this is probably just Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Hell, you probably think this is Mara! However, ignoring the obvious, the Undead Parasite is actually a fun boss to encounter, especially considering that it's the first boss you fight. Yeah, now that you know that little piece of context, it doesn't make things any better now, does it? Regardless though, the thing that you're supposed to be aiming at is not the entity that you think you probably need to be aiming at. Instead, you need to be hitting the 4 eyes that are on the ground. All the while you're being berated by whatever the hell this is, and soulless husks that will try to attack you. Once you dispatch the 4 eyeballs, it will then move on to its second phase where it will have a... Seriously, what the hell is this? I'm just gonna call it a demon sponge and move it on. So, essentially a demon sponge then spawns into the middle of the room, and after attacking it for a while, it will change placements to any of the 4 corners that you were attacking previously. All the while, the fricking whatever the hell this is, starts attacking you more sporadically. So you know what that means, more fire and more random whatever the hell it's doing. However, once you defeat the boss, you will have a nice little greeting from the thing itself, as it screams and returns back to whatever canyon it came out of. But yeah, other than the fact that I have pure disgust for this damn thing, I actually do find myself having a lot of fun fighting it. Plus, I think the theming of the boss is quite excellent. Now, if you ask me what is the parasite exactly, the Mara looking thing or the room that you're in, I don't know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Number 5. The Elementals. Okay, I know this is technically cheating by putting like 3 different bosses in the same spot, but frankly, I literally cannot for the life of me figure out which one is my favorite above all of them. So I'm just gonna put them in the same number and be content with that. However, if you ask me which of the elementals I'd rank in whatever order, I'd say the fire elemental is in dead last, then comes the frost elemental, and then lastly is the lightning elemental. Frankly though, because I think the lightning elemental has more interesting attack patterns and is a lot more fun to deal with. Meanwhile, the fire elemental is just... well, he just swings, so that's all she wrote. The frost elemental finds a good combination of the two, but it's nothing too fancy and it doesn't elevate it more than the lightning elemental for me. However, what really elevates the 3 bosses for me is not only their stage designs, but also the fact that they have one of the best songs in the entire series. I know, for bosses that could be considered as sub-bosses, you wouldn't think that their theme would go this hard. But no. Castlevania has to be the series where unnecessary things have to go extremely hard. Oh right, forgot to mention, the elementals are completely optional. However, if you are looking for the white orb, then 2 out of the 3 elementals are non-negotiables, as you would have to go for them at that point. However, that just means that the best one, being the lightning elemental, is practically entirely optional, as there is no reason as to why you would need to go out of your way to fight him, unless you want to complete the game. Which I did, by the way. But anyway, the elementals are surprisingly good despite how simple their attack patterns tend to be. Number 4. Yahim Armster. Here's a little tidbit for all of you. Originally, Yahim was going to be in my top 20 Castlevania bosses video. However, I made a numerical mistake where 2 bosses share the same number, and I had to figure out which boss I wanted to replace, and he ended up getting the chopping block, as I didn't think it would make any sense for someone like him to be in 6th place. But don't get that twisted though. He is a really good boss, and he has one of the best boss themes in the game. If, of course, we're not accounting for the fact that the elementals exist. Plus, a lot of the reason why he's up this high is mainly due to my biases. Plus the fact that Yahim is one of the more story-driven characters within the game. He's not like Succubus or Medusa where sure they have a cutscene here or there, but Yahim actually has an integral point to the plot, as he was the right-hand man to Walter himself, and we could have literally gotten a whole game just based on him. But no, Konami, let's not have nice things. Regardless though, Yahim is one of those bosses that you need to do things before actually attacking him personally. So what are those things exactly? Well, there are 3 orbs in the room, and if you had a free roaming camera, chances are there'd be 4. But for now we're gonna stick with the 3. There are 3 orbs that you have to attack at each corner of the room. Once you attack them, you are able to attack Yahim and lower his health. However, Yahim will make it his personal mission to ensure that you are not able to destroy those orbs, whether it be by summoning pillars of fire or launching swords as if they were spears from down below. However, once you do destroy those orbs, you are free to attack him as you please. However, that does not mean that Yahim is personally defenseless, as he will try to attack you with swords coming out of the ground, or just with his swords in general. He also has the occasional ability where he can turn himself into a saw, so beware of that. Now, if only though you could do all this cool shit if you were playing as him in the side mode. Oh well. Plus, if you do play as Yahim in the extra mode that you are able to unlock by beating the game, you practically get to fight Yahim again. Which fun part being that if you fight Yahim as Yahim, the Yahim you're fighting against is, chances are, a doppelganger. Now aren't we just coming back in full circle? Of the moon. Number 3. Walter. Although admittedly not the hardest boss in the game due to the fact that for some reason he shares the same health pool as literally everyone else, I think the lead up to his fight and the fight that we're having is quite magical. Plus, I love Walter as a character, and if you don't believe me, I literally made a 30-minute video based on it. Go fucking watch it. But yeah, if you're well versed on how Dracula works, then you exactly know how Walter's gonna work in tandem, as it's just anything that Dracula can muster, but it's in 3D. Plus anything I may have mentioned in my Curse of Darkness review about Dracula in that game, basically can also apply to Walter in this game, as they both have carbon copy movesets. I wonder why. And admittedly speaking, Walter has one of the weakest boss themes in the game. However, that's discounting the regular boss theme that plays when you're going against high level enemies, so yeah, take that for what you will. Regardless of that though, I think Walter's a very imposing presence, and I genuinely like his fight, despite the many flaws that I pointed out. It goes to show you that there's not just gameplay elements that go into a boss fight in this game, but there's a lot of other things, like music, setting, and the lead up to one. Which is why the next 2 bosses are highly important. Number 2. Death. He is the only boss in this game that surpasses 2,000 health. In fact, he has 4,444 health. Now, for many of my JRPG fans out there, that probably doesn't sound like much, but considering that every boss in this game either has 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000 health, this guy decides to show up to the ring with the most ridiculous amount of health that I've ever fucking seen. But let's forget about that for a minute. Let's talk about the fact that most of his attacks could instantly kill you. May I remind everyone within this video about Deadly Tempest? Or perhaps even the Golden Skulls that are summoned by him to work as suicide bombers? Or perhaps even all the scythes he fucking uses. No, and let's talk about the fact that he is a piece of work to try and hit. I know death boss fights are meant to be hard, some are easier than others, and then you just have this. Like I stated in my top 20 Castlevania bosses video, this guy is by far one of the hardest death boss fights if we are not accounting for the other 2D games. Cause if we are, then he's probably tied up there with Dawn of Sorrow's death. I'm telling you, this man is a menace. No, and the way he makes his entry too, absolutely diabolical. Plus, I don't know who voiced Death in this game, but kudos to them, man, they actually sold it. If anyone ever wanted me to pick out what I wanted Death to sound like, I would use this version of Death as an example. Plus, a little trivia fun fact, his theme in this game is actually reused in Castlevania Judgment, in case you haven't noticed from the naming schemes of both of the songs. Now, I don't know why they chose this version of Death specifically, but I'm not complaining. However, now we only have one more boss to look at, and if by this point you haven't figured out who the number 1 is, well then I just feel sorry for you. But the number one is the Forgotten One. Haha, funny joke, am I right? Other than the fact that he is conveniently the number one, despite having a one in his name, I cannot tell you how much this boss has affected me on a personal level. I already went to a lot of detail as to why I think the Forgotten One is like one of the best bosses in the series in my top 20 Castlevania bosses, so if you want a more discreet explanation, you can go there to watch it. However, allow me to give a gross summary as to why I think he's number one. A, he has one of the coolest designs I have ever fucking seen. B, his boss fight is actually a lot harder than I thought, and it's the hardest in the entire game. In fact, he is by far the only boss to surpass even Death's freaking HP at an astounding 14,400 health. That is ridiculous. And the fact that he too can instant kill you, and has moves that can hit like a truck, yeah, you could understand why this guy would be a run killer. And to my knowledge, there's no really easy way to cheese him like there is with Galamoth from Symphony of the Night. No, you have to fucking fight this guy fair and square whether you like it or not. C, the way he's introduced into the game is very fascinating, as he can literally be one of the first things you see in the game if you explore hard enough. In fact, if you go to the start area where the portal rooms are and just take a left from the angle of the camera, you will enter then a staircase that will lead you into the Prison of Eternal Torture, which not only can you see him from the roof, but you can also fucking hear him. He's also foreshadowed in the game at least once before you fight him, however that won't happen until the Pagoda of the Misty Moon, so have fun discovering that piece of information out. Plus, he's the one boss that's a prerequisite to actually getting to the final boss, so if you think you can just skip on by him, nah, you're funny. You're gonna fight him like the rest of us, pal, and you're not gonna have dreams about it. However, lastly, D being his theme is absolutely grotesque. And what I mean by that is that it fits him so fucking well. Especially for a guy who has maggots all around him during the first phase and is a literal hanging corpse. In case you probably haven't put two and two together by this point, the Forgotten One is just a 3D version of Beelzebub from Symphony of the Night, except a lot harder and a lot cooler.
Oh, I wouldn't go anywhere near him if I were you.
So essentially, it's this. But although it's one of the hardest bosses that I've ever encountered, it is by far one of the funnest, as I can't really think of any other boss that has impacted me the same way that the Forgotten One has. If only there wasn't a game that was developed by the same people who made Metroid Dread and published by Konami that totally did not ruin him in any way, shape or form. However, that is a topic for another day. Regardless, I'm glad all of you could see how diverse and how well put together Lament of Innocence's cast of bosses is, as you really have the best of both worlds. Some are easy, some are piss hard, some are cool, some make me want to rip out my ears, and among other things. However, that's all I have to say about the bosses, and I hope you found my commentary for them quite intriguing. But now we have more important matters to get on to. Now, I know this section is called Tone and Setting, but I mainly wanted to use this section to mainly talk about things that I found very interesting that are held within the game. It just so happens, though, that a lot of the things that I find interesting have something to do with either the tone of the game or the setting, so convenient, huh? So, one of the things I wanted to point out is that there's a certain leitmotif going on in the game, and I don't know if any of you have heard it specifically, however there are some songs that share a certain type of repetition with one another. And I don't know how to describe it because I'm not a music major, but what I can say is that there's a certain use of the clarinet that can be seen, or heard rather, in a lot of the songs that are within this game. Plus, there's also a certain rhythm that can be heard within some of the songs. For example, when re-listening to this game's OST for the purposes of this video, I noticed that a lot of songs have a similar sounding beat to them at certain points. Now, some of them sound a lot similar to each other, others kind of don't. And the songs themselves are kind of inconsistent when it comes to like messaging and meaning, and when it's used, so I don't take it that this particular rhythm has like an unbinding connection to all these things. I just find it very interesting that some of these songs have that similar rhythm. So, songs like The Cross of Fate, Dark Knight Toccata, Melancholy Yahim, Dark Palace of Waterfalls, Elemental Tactician, and House of Sacred Remains all have this specific rhythm. But, to give you more of a clear understanding of what I'm talking about, allow me to play the songs in the sections that I think that this rhythm can be heard. See what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna go on some grand conspiracy as to trying to link these songs together, although that was the initial purpose of doing this, because the songs in tandem just have nothing to do with each other. Like, okay, the only songs that have some form of connection is Dark Knight Toccata and Melancholy Yahim, because at least those two songs are connected to a specific character, or a specific series of characters that have a close story connection that can be drawn. However, the rest of them just don't have that. Plus, another musical thing that I wanted to take note is that some of the songs within the OST are actually remixed versions of different songs that are already pre-existing within the Castlevania series. Songs like Castlevania Reincarnation actually use semblances from Dracula's Castle and the Blank Banquet from Symphony of the Night. The Cross of Fate is actually a remix of Ruined Castle Corridor from Aria of Sorrow. Holy Cross Obsessed by the Moon is actually a remix of Top Floor from Aria of Sorrow. And the last song that I could pinpoint is Requiem for the Dark Souls, which is a remix of the chapel theme from Aria of Sorrow. which makes a lot of sense because they came out in the same year, only via a few months apart. So, you can probably tell by that point that these two games were probably in development around the same time. Now, onto things about the setting. As I've stated in my Walter Bernhard video, the Anti-Souls Mystery Laboratory is filled to the brim with religious iconography. And of course, since we're in an alchemy lab, all these religious iconography have something to do with alchemy. Which, I don't know if any of you know this, but Christians were actually quite the scientists. I know, shocker. Because believe it or not, the belief in science was actually that the study of science was actually studying the world that God had made. So it would make perfect sense as to why such religious and devout people would dedicate their almost entire existence to studying the sciences behind God's world. Now, in that same video, I also discussed how in the Anti-Souls Mysteries Laboratory that there's a lot of iconography based on the Aurora Consurgens by Thomas Aquinas, and how a lot of the symbolism within the lab can be traced to Leon and Sarah's connection within the story, as a lot of the iconography shows two beings converging into one. Which, if you know how the story ends by this point, then it shouldn't surprise you as to why these things are here. Another thing that I pointed out in that video is something to do with the Garden Forgotten by Time, as some areas are unexpectedly covered in sunlight. And if you remember one of the key plot points to the entirety of Lament of Innocence, you should be scratching your head as to why the hell there's sunlight in, oh, I don't know, a place that's covered in the eternal night? Well, don't worry. Your masterful Cereza Valentine can obviously answer that for you. You see, if I was an entity that bets, I would likely say that the only reason why this is a thing is so that Leon can get the illusion that there's actual sunlight within those walls. However, all of it is just a deception, considering that later on, through the garden, we actually see more of what it actually is. A fucking hellhole! So, to give Leon some deluded sense of hope, the sunlight is primarily there to give anyone who enters the garden for the first time a sense of hope that there might actually be an end somewhere. Oh, if only they knew. Then there's the Dark Palace of Waterfalls, which I really went into depth in my Walter video, so I'll just rephrase everything here. Essentially what the Dark Palace of Waterfalls is a giant dungeon and or prison for a vampire who has more revenge fantasies than your average Twitter user. The reason specifically as to why there's so much fucking water everywhere is because of the common belief that vampires cannot traverse running water. So that eliminates any question that you may have as to why there's so much fucking water everywhere. And now you're probably wondering, how did Walter imprison Yahim down there if he too is also a vampire? So if he were to activate the water, he would be trapped there too. And my response to that is, you're really asking that from a series that has teleporting vampires, a legacy family that basically hunts down one guy and yet nobody on the planet just chooses to hunt the vampires along with said family, and only after that family leaves did they try to fill the void? Essentially my answer to that question is, he just did, lol. Then there's the House of Sacred Remains, which, yeah, it's a pseudo-church. Now, there's two meanings behind this area that I can probably give way to. Either the first area in the game is a church to highlight Leon's religious beginnings or his religious ties, and then later on the area just shows that none of it means anything and it can no longer help Leon where he is. Or this is an allusion to the fact that the boss in this area is an undead parasite who dilutes or consumes helpless souls into following his religion or ideology to further enhance his own gains. This is some Hideo Kojima-ass commentary.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
Turn off.
And you know what? We're here for it. And then there's the Ghostly Theatre, which I'ma be honest, I have no idea what the resemblance is for this area. Which I guess you can say is like a message of how Walter views the entirety of Leon's journey up to this point. But it's really never overtly stated anywhere, and it's not like it's something obvious that you'd come down to. The only way I can imagine anyone like me who would come to this conclusion is if you were thinking about it for far longer than you needed to. It doesn't help either that chances are the boss of this area has an OnlyFans, and frankly, I do not want to discover that. But going through all that, what can I safely say about the tone of this game? Well, for starters, it tries to take itself very seriously, which I do admire. The only problem has to do with the fact that, I probably said this once before and I'll say it again, everyone in this game looks like a Barbie doll if they were trying to RP in a frickin' dark fantasy roleplay. And not in the fun way. It is such a shame that this game has one of the better stories in the series, yet it's so bogged down to the fact that A, the characters can't express emotions correctly, or B, none of us can take them seriously because of how they look. It is such a freaking shame. But yeah, I've basically gone over everything that I possibly could think of when it comes to the tones and settings. The tone is quite nice and the setting is quite pleasant, and I can safely say that this game is home to one of my favorite Castlevania interpretations I have seen in a hot while. But I've said my piece. Let's wrap this up, shall we? So, in the end, what can we safely conclude about this entire experience? Well, to start things off, Lament of Innocence has shown me that this game has one of the most interesting stories within the entire series, as well as the most interesting set of characters that we've ever been given. Now, sure, granted, the graphics for the game are not visually impressive, however, it does make up for it in other ways. The enemy design, the gameplay, the bosses, the music, the tone and setting, all of it comes together to create a fantastic meal of a game. Now, we all know that Lament of Innocence is not the first time that Castlevania chose to delve into 3D graphics. And trust me, I'll cover that one day. However, in the now, I can safely say that, for the start on the PS2, that Lament of Innocence, although it used to be my top 2 favorite Castlevania game, has gradually excelled itself into my number 1 favorite Castlevania game of all time.
Cereza, I know damn well that shit did not happen.
I swear to any god that I can conveniently swear on, it fucking happened. He was literally right in front of me and speaking to me as if I was a plank piece of cardboard.
Cereza, that cannot be plausible. That happened 1,000 years ago. He is dead by this point. You mean to tell me that Ronaldo Gandolfi, the man whose daughter I have done things to, which I legally cannot discuss, is alive?
Yes! Hell, when I looked at the tips of my vision, I literally saw blonde hair. I don't know if you know this, Walter, but I'm not blonde!
I don't know. But if the shoe fits...
You know, Walter, the nearest ledge is 5 yards away.
I joke with you, be a good sport. Besides, now that that happened, what's the next thing you plan on doing?
What do you mean?
Well, you're not staying here, that's for sure.
Oh ho, I can't wait to hear this one. Why?
Oh, I don't know. You turned my castle into a shelter for men who have men issues. Some of the rooms in my castle are no longer where they should be. I wonder where they went. And lastly, Matthew doesn't seem to like you very much.
Oh, no shit, I didn't even know the last part was true.
Sarcasm.
But where the hell do you want me to stay then? It's not like I can ask Dracula if I can stay with him for a while. Last time I met with him, I fucking blew up his castle!
And why the hell did you do that?
He said that Castlevania Chronicles was the 8th worst Castlevania game.
Alright, on second thought, understandable. Continue.
It's not like I can go to the Belmonts because, you know, they're Belmonts. And I practically already met up the bargain that I had with Isaac, so he doesn't really owe me much of anything anymore. And it's not like I can go with Alucard because he'll probably want to kill me too.
And where the hell would he kill you?
Okay, remember how I said that I blew up Dracula's castle because he put Castlevania Chronicles in 8th?
Yes?
Well, before that, I kind of had a relationship with his younger self.
Oh my god, you fucking did not.
So yeah, if he finds out about that, I am dead with a capital D.
Why don't you try living with Carmilla for a bit? I heard her place is always open to those who need it.
You are clinically insane if you think I'm ever gonna go near her.
Oh well, suit yourself. But anyway, it was nice speaking with you, Valentine. Hopefully the next time we speak will be on more friendlier terms.
Now what the hell do I do? Who the hell, out of all people, is calling me now? Yes, hello?
Season's greetings, my lord.
Oh. Hi, Calypso. Wasn't expecting to hear a call from you. What do you want?
I have news that I think will be of use to you.
That being?
Your castle. It has risen once again. Awaiting for the day when its lord can finally return to its seat.
Oh my god. Yes! Finally! Just in time! Alright, Calypso, you hear me, you freaking sexy-ass wizard. I am coming home.
We'll be expecting your arrival.
Worry not, Castle Nero, for your master is returning home.